$13.3 billion, 6,000 people, 18 decks of classified secrets that even four-star admirals cannot access without permission. The USS Gerald R. Ford is not just the most expensive warship ever built. It is a floating civilization operating entirely beneath the surface of what the world is allowed to see. How does a machine this complex stay invisible, invincible, and in motion, powered by 30 people most Americans will never hear of? Let's go inside. Consider these numbers: 333 meters of reinforced steel, 100,000 tons of displacement, 4.5 acres of flight deck, a construction cost of $13.3 billion, 2 nuclear reactors generating 700 megawatts, enough electricity to power a city of 150,000 people, and 6,000 human beings living, working, and sleeping inside a machine so complex that its own builders needed 12 years to complete it. The USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, is the most expensive warship ever constructed in human history. It will operate for 50 years without a single refueling stop.
Every photograph ever published of an aircraft carrier shows the same thing: the flight deck, the aircraft, the sheer overwhelming scale of American naval power projecting across every ocean simultaneously. That image is real, but it is also deliberately incomplete. Beneath that flight deck lie 18 decks of compartments, passageways, reactor rooms, and classified infrastructure so intricate that a complete architectural blueprint has never been publicly released. Not one page, not one diagram. Because understanding what's down there means understanding exactly how it works. And that knowledge belongs exclusively to the United States Navy. Imagine your first night aboard USS Gerald R. Ford. You are 19 years old, fresh out of boot camp, assigned to your first real duty station. A senior petty officer leads you down 4 ladder wells past the hangar bay, through a corridor so narrow 2 people can barely pass each other. The lighting is red, the air is hot, a low mechanical hum vibrates through the soles of your boots. You stop at a bulkhead. Your escort says nothing. Because 10 meters from where you are standing, separated by 30 centimeters of lead-lined radiation shielding, are 2 A1B nuclear reactors. Your job starts here tomorrow at 0600. You had no idea this room existed until 40 seconds ago. Nothing exposes the true complexity of these vessels more completely than what happened aboard USS Shiloh in the summer of 2017. Petty Officer Peter Mims vanished without a trace, not overboard, not ashore, but somewhere deep inside the ship itself. For 7 consecutive days, the entire crew conducted search operations. Thermal sensors confirmed he was still aboard. Search teams swept deck by deck, compartment by compartment. They found nothing. 7 days later, Mims was discovered alive inside a network of maintenance tunnels beneath the engine room, surviving on a Camelback water system, candy bars, and a jar of peanut butter in temperatures exceeding 54 degrees Celsius. Search teams had passed within meters of him multiple times and could not reach him safely. Read that carefully. A full-scale military search operation conducted by the ship's own crew with complete access to every resource aboard a commissioned warship could not locate a single human being inside it for 7 consecutive days. That is not a failure of competence. That is a testament to what these ships actually are beneath the surface. 4 layers of classified spaces, 4 hidden worlds operating simultaneously, each with its own systems, its own personnel, its own rules of access. And most of the 6,000 people aboard will spend entire deployments never knowing those worlds exist. This is not a story about machines. It is a story about the men and women operating inside them, in spaces the world will never photograph, performing work the world will never fully understand, carrying responsibilities that would break most people within a week. If that is the kind of story that matters to you, hit subscribe right now. Every week we go deeper into the realities of American military power that never make the front page. You will not find this level of detail anywhere else.
What lives beneath that flight deck, and who are the people carrying the weight of it all, every single day in spaces no camera has ever captured.
Deep below the waterline of USS Gerald R. Ford, buried beneath 4 decks of classified infrastructure, sit 2 A1B pressurized water reactors. These are not an incremental upgrade from the Nimitz era. They are a generational leap. Each A1B unit is 25% more powerful than the A4W reactors that powered Nimitz-class carriers, since USS Nimitz was commissioned in 1975 while occupying a compartment volume approximately 30% smaller. Combined electrical output reaches 700 megawatts, simultaneously powering the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, full radar arrays the complete defensive weapons suite, and every operational system aboard the ship at peak capacity. All of it, at the same time, without drawing from external power for the next 50 years.
The fuel cycle is the most strategically significant specification the Navy rarely discusses publicly. The A1B uses a highly enriched uranium core with a design lifespan matching the ship itself approximately 50 years. USS Gerald R will be decommissioned before its reactors ever require refueling. But the deeper advantage is acoustic and thermal. The reactor compartments are encased in radiation shielding, so precisely engineered that the thermal and electromagnetic signature of both reactors is effectively invisible to external detection systems. An adversary submarine, running its most sophisticated passive sonar arrays at 50 nautical miles, cannot reliably isolate the ship's nuclear signature from background ocean noise. The most powerful nuclear warship on Earth is by design thermally hidden.
Access to these compartments requires personal authorization from Naval Reactors, the organization Admiral Hyman Rickover established in 1949 with direct authority over every naval nuclear program in U.S. history. A four-star admiral cannot enter unannounced. The protocols do not permit it. The engineers who operate these systems, approximately 30 per carrier, are selected through a process that begins with a personal interview conducted by the Director of Naval Reactors, a flag officer with dual reporting authority to the Chief of Naval Operations, and the Secretary of Energy. Training lasts 6 to 8 years before independent qualification. These are not sailors with additional certifications. They are a different category of human being entirely.
When USS Gerald R. Ford is underway, those 30 engineers do not take days off. They eat, sleep, and exist within 50 meters of the reactors. They manage continuously for the entire deployment. When a technical alert fires a pressure variance, a cooling anomaly, any deviation from nominal parameters, they respond in complete silence. No announcement over the ship's intercom, no visible signal to the other 5,970 personnel aboard. Because panic costs seconds. And in a reactor event, seconds are the entire margin between a managed response and an unmanageable one. 30 human beings, $13.3 billion in steel and technology, 6,000 lives, every single day at sea.
Directly beneath the propulsion machinery, Spaces runs a three-dimensional network that most of the ship's crew will never enter and were never meant to. The catacombs, a system of maintenance tunnels, structural access passages, and emergency escape routes threading between load-bearing hull frames and machinery foundations. They were engineered with one original purpose: to provide escape routes for engine room personnel during catastrophic flooding or fire, where primary exits become inaccessible within seconds. The geometry is not designed for human comfort. Passages require crawling prone for stretches of 15 to 20 meters. Intersections split in three directions with no visible markings in low light conditions. Temperatures adjacent to active machinery regularly reach 54 degrees Celsius.
The men who perform routine maintenance inside the catacombs receive no public recognition, no photographs in Navy recruitment materials, no names in press releases. Their work inspecting structural welds, maintaining bilge systems, accessing components unreachable through primary routes happens in complete darkness in spaces where a medical emergency requires specialized extraction before treatment can begin. They show up every shift because without their work, systems fail. And when systems fail 500 nautical miles from the nearest port, the word inconvenient does not apply. The MIMS incident proved something more unsettling than one man's survival story. It proved that these spaces are so architecturally complex that a full military search operation with complete shipboard resources cannot guarantee locating a single human being inside them. The catacombs are not just a maintenance system. They are a world operating entirely outside the ship's awareness. Could you work in that environment? 54 degrees zero natural light, no one who knows your exact location, and trust the system to bring you back. Leave your answer below.
The reactor holds the power. The catacombs hold the ship together. Both depend entirely on people no one will ever name. But if those spaces are the heart and circulatory system of this floating city? Where is the brain and who are the people inside it? Making decisions that could determine the outcome of a naval engagement in under 4 minutes. Tucked in between the flight deck and the hangar bay, accessible only through a sequence of secured hatches that require both biometric clearance and an escort, sits the Combat Information Center of USS Gerald R. Ford. No windows, no natural light, no connection to the outside world except through the data streams feeding into its displays from every sensor the ship carries. The AN/SPY-6V1 Air and Missile Defense Radar. The most powerful naval radar ever deployed on a surface combatant, feeds real-time tracking data on more than 1,000 simultaneous targets across a detection radius of 550 kilometers. That data flows into CIC through integrated Link 16 data link systems connecting every asset in the Carrier Strike Group destroyers, cruisers, submarines, and airborne early warning aircraft operating across a combined battle space the size of Western Europe. Inside that space, operations specialists work 12-hour shifts in near darkness surrounded by the blue-green glow of radar scopes and tactical displays. The average age of an OS working a CIC watch station is 22 years old. When an unidentified contact appears at the edge of the radar envelope, closing at 900 kilometers per hour on a profile, consistent with a YJ-12 supersonic anti-ship missile, that 22-year-old has approximately 4 minutes to classify the contact, escalate through the chain of command, and support a weapons release decision. 4 minutes is not a guideline. It is the physical reality of engagement timelines at modern naval combat speeds. A mistake in either direction carries catastrophic consequences. Engage a civilian aircraft or hesitate on an incoming missile. Both errors end careers. One ends lives. One deck directly above CIC on the Zero. 3 level running beneath the flight deck are the squadron ready rooms. Each of the air wing squadrons aboard CVN-78 operates its own dedicated space, equipped with armchair seats arranged in precise order, closed-circuit television systems linking all rooms during joint briefings, and direct communication lines to air operations. The commanding officer sits front left, mirroring the pilot's seat position. The executive officer sits front right. That arrangement is not ceremonial. It is a continuous physical reinforcement of command hierarchy, operating even in the moments before a pilot walks out to the flight deck. What happens in these rooms before a mission is something no technical manual captures. Pilots writing their names on the whiteboard. A last exchange of eye contact with the person in the next seat. The specific silence that fills the room in the final 60 seconds before the brief ends and everyone stands. F/A, 18E/F. Super Hornet pilots launching from CVN-78 are strapped into a $67 million aircraft and accelerated from 0 to 265 kilometers per hour in 2.5 seconds. The aircraft weighs up to 29.9 tons at maximum takeoff weight. The mission profile can last 6 to 8 hours over hostile airspace at altitudes up to 50,000 feet. When those pilots return and walk back into the ready room, the first thing every person in that room does without discussion, without instruction, is count the chairs. A ready room that had 12 occupied seats before the mission and returns to 11 is a ready room that will fly again tomorrow morning at the same time with the same briefing format and 11 people who now understand something about this profession that no training syllabus ever fully prepares you for. If you were the commanding officer standing in that room, what do you say to the 10 pilots still looking at you? Leave your answer below. Below the ready rooms below, CIC, running the length of the ship beneath the launch strip, is the infrastructure that makes every aircraft departure possible. The electromagnetic aircraft launch system, EMALS, replaced the C-13 steam catapults that had powered carrier aviation since the 1950s. The distinction is not merely mechanical. Steam catapults deliver a fixed, uncontrolled energy profile, a single violent surge that creates peak stress loads on airframe structures. EMALS delivers a precisely modulated electromagnetic force calibrated in real time to the exact weight and configuration of each individual aircraft. A 10-ton drone receives a different energy profile than a 29-ton Super Hornet at maximum combat load. Airframe. Fatigue loads are reduced by an estimated 24%. Maintenance requirements drop by 30% compared to the C-13 system, and the entire launch sequence from static to 265 kilometers per hour completes in 2.5 seconds. The emails operator does not control a machine, he controls outcomes. On a full flight operations day, aboard CVN 78, that operator executes between 120 and 150 individual launches. Each launch is a separate decision catapult, bar engaged launch bar, down final grip check trigger. Each one puts a human being at the end of a controlled electromagnetic impulse, traveling from 0 to flight speed in under 3 seconds. A miscalibrated energy setting too low and the aircraft cannot achieve flying speed off the bow too high. And the structural loads exceed airframe limits has consequences that cannot be reversed. That operator makes this decision 120 times per day, every day of a deployment that averages 7 to 9 months. There is no day when the pressure is lower than the day before.
USS Gerald R. Ford carries a medical department capable of performing cardiovascular surgery, orthopedic trauma intervention, and general anesthesia procedures 500 nautical miles from the nearest shoreside hospital. The ship produces 1,500 tons of fresh water daily through reverse osmosis desalination systems and serves approximately 20,000 meals every 24 hours across continuous galley operations. But it is the surgical suite that represents the most concentrated form of individual human responsibility aboard. One surgeon, one operating room, no transfer option if the case exceeds 8 hours, no second team on standby. When a trauma case arrives, whether from a flight deck accident, a machinery casualty, or a combat injury, the physician who scrubs in is the only option available. That is not a systemic failure. That is a deliberate design reality of forward deployed naval medicine. And those surgeons accept it as the baseline condition of their service.
After the reactors, the catacombs, the radar rooms, the ready rooms, and the launch systems. What is the one thing that no adversary budget, no shipyard timeline, and no state procurement program can actually replicate?
China launched its most advanced carrier Fujian Type 003 after a construction program spanning more than a decade. It displaces approximately 80,000 tons, uses electromagnetic catapults modeled on EMALS technology, and represents the most significant naval capital investment in Chinese military history. The ship exists, the catapults function, the flight deck is real. What cannot be purchased, reverse engineered, or accelerated through any defense procurement process is what fills the compartments of USS Gerald R. Ford with actual capability. 8 years of nuclear reactors training inside the skull of a 30-year-old engineer. The 4-minute threat classification reflex of a 22-year-old operations specialist who has run that scenario 3,000 times in simulation before doing it for real. The surgical composure of a Navy physician performing a thoracotomy in a room moving at sea in conditions that would ground most civilian operating theaters. Those are not technologies.
They are not systems. They are human beings, and they took decades to produce. When USS Gerald R. Ford returns from deployment and pulls into Naval Station Norfolk, the cameras are there. Journalists photograph the flight deck. Families photograph the hull. Navy Public Affairs photographs the captain on the bridge. Nobody photographs the emails operator walking down the brow after 150 launches in a single day. Nobody photographs the catacomb maintenance technician who spent 8 hours in 54-degree heat repairing a bilge system that, if it had failed, would have forced the entire battle group to change its operational posture. Nobody photographs the CIC watchstander who correctly classified an ambiguous contact at 0300 and made the right call before anyone senior to him had finished reading the initial report. These people do not appear in the story the world tells about American naval power. They are the reason that story is true.
Training one F/A, 18E/F Super Hornet pilot to carrier qualification from initial flight screening through the Fleet Replacement Squadron to first arrested landing aboard a commissioned carrier cost the United States Navy approximately $11 million and a minimum of 8 to 10 years. A Naval Reactors qualified nuclear engineer requires 6 to 8 years of specialized education and hands-on training before independent watch qualification. There is no compressed version of this pipeline. There is no reserve force that can be activated to fill these billets on short notice. When a carrier deploys the human beings aboard, it represents decades of accumulated institutional investment, that cannot be reconstituted quickly if it is lost. China can build another Fujian in 10 years. No one has published a credible timeline for producing the human infrastructure needed to operate it at the level American crews operate, CVN 78, because no such timeline exists. Because human expertise does not scale the way steel production does.
Consider what these people absorb over a single deployment. The nuclear engineer who manages a cooling system anomaly at 0200 without waking the ship. The ready room commanding officer who briefs the morning's mission with one fewer pilot than he had yesterday. The emails operator on his 140th launch of the day, knowing that the same absolute standard applies to this one as it did to the first. The surgeon who closes a trauma case at sea and then returns to the medical bay to document the procedure, because documentation is also part of the job. None of these moments generate headlines. None of them produce photographs. All of them collectively are what makes the difference between a $13.3 billion asset and a $13.3 billion capability. Steel and technology produce an asset. People transform it into a capability that no adversary has yet matched. Here is what we know. The USS Gerald R carries technology that took 40 years to develop. Its reactors will run for 50 years without refueling. Its radar can track 1,000 targets simultaneously across 550 kilometers of battle space. Its email system can launch a 29-ton aircraft to flight speed in 2.5 seconds with electromagnetic precision. All of that is remarkable. All of that is real. And all of it depends entirely on a 22-year-old in a dark room making a correct decision. In 4 minutes, a 30-year-old engineer who has not had a day off in 3 months, and a surgeon who accepted on the day they signed their commission that there would be no backup available when it mattered most. So here's the question we're sitting with, which is harder to replicate, the $13.3 billion ship or the people inside it? Leave your answer in the comments, because the answer you give says a great deal about how you understand power.
Every compartment on USS Gerald R. Ford contains a version of this story. Unnamed, unrecognized, and essential. The men and women serving in these hidden spaces are not asking for acknowledgement. They signed up for the work, not the credit. But understanding what they actually do and what it actually cost them changes the way you look at American naval power. It is not a fleet of ships. It is a continuous living institution built from decades of human investment, sustained by people who choose every single day to carry a weight that most of the world will never know exists. If that story matters to you, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the greatest secrets aboard America's aircraft carriers were never classified. They just never made the news.